Kind of wish them.
Hi everyone.
Hello. You were bumping to the music, and I said bumping. I knew I was trying not to say that. Man, I'm so white.
You are not white at all, girl. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Trigger Warning 2A podcast.
Yes, I'm Antonia Okafor.
And I'm Nina Prevo. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Yes, and we have a special guest in the studio.
Mm-hmm. In the flesh.
In the flesh, yes. We have Patriot Panda here with us.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us
I'm
today.
I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We're excited.
We're glad to have our first in-studio guest, so thank you for your willingness to come on and be our guinea pig for this experience, at least of our first in-studio guest. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's awkward. You're like, oh, right. Okay. Then first on our agenda is, okay, tell me about this whole NBC article.
Oh, yes.
And that came out today.
No,
I
think it was a couple days ago, or over the weekend rather, but I'm sure that some members of our audience will be aware of this NBC article, in which they basically questioned whether or not being straight is still something that works.
Yeah,
which is, just saying those words is almost kind of insane to me. But I showed the article to you ladies before we started, but some of the noteworthy ideas from this article are that heterosexuality in itself is part of the patriarchy, and that men need heterosexuality to maintain their dominance over women. And like, I can't even keep a straight face when I say this stuff,
because we have a male in the studio. It's really awkward right now.
I know.
And actually we made sure that we felt on Women's Equality Day felt empowered by keeping him from having a mic.
I know he doesn't have a mic today.
So he has no voice. And no, Edgar, no.
Help.
Keep your patriarchy to yourself.
That's so funny.
This is why we just got married.
I know, right? Or well,
I am, and you're about to.
I'll be married soon enough. But and also, I mean, the whole idea, the inspiration for the article was Miley Cyrus breaking up with Liam, because the idea is that she's showing how women don't need to be heterosexuals anymore. We just don't need to. It's not a matter of that being like an innate preference that we can't change or something. It's just, if women are being heterosexuals, they're clearly just supporting this patriarchal society. And it was one of those times where I opened Twitter and I saw that, and I just didn't
Emily, what do you
think
to
be on the planet
this?
anymore.
What do you think about this?
I had a hard time reading it. I was just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So did she come out then after she broke up with him?
Right?
Or are they just assuming this?
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I don't think she did. I mean, I don't think that she's professed that she's had any kind of sexuality change. I think this author is just taking it upon themselves to make assumptions about the fact that, she got married, and then she kind of had this whole situation with the like licking the abortion cake and the red cat suit that was really frightening to see, and I just think that they were trying to use Miley as a symbol of like women's empowerment or liberation or some nonsense.
When you're using Miley Cyrus for your vehicle of women's empowerment, you know that the next wave needs to happen or it's dead.
I know, it is so time for the
over.
fourth wave. We need it so bad.
Yeah, that's really bad. And the fact too is like, maybe Miley Cyrus is just not a good spouse. Maybe she doesn't know how to make a relationship work. First of all, don't use her as an example. Second of all, there are people who just don't work out. And also, I feel like that would be patronizing to a lot of lesbian and gay couples, right? And to say that, oh, well, there's something about you guys. Like, you guys make it work all the time. It's like, no, actually, just because they got married means there's still people who are getting divorced, too. It doesn't mean they automatically work out because they're not a heterosexual relationship.
Right.
But I don't think this is what that author really cares about. It's not the working out part. It's the fact that she just wants.
No. It's all the promotion of this agenda. I mean, and it's something that Edgar mentioned before. Part of what I really find annoying about this article is it kind of talks about heterosexuality as if women are just choosing to be
Right.
heterosexuals, whereas for so long it's like, you know, you're born this way, and that's the whole idea. But if it's just a situation where women can just be like, actually no, I'm not straight, and being straight doesn't work, then I actually think that kind of undermines the entire argument about homosexuality. Like,
Right.
if sexuality is something that is innate in us, then it shouldn't be something that women can just choose to ignore for the sake of fighting, I don't know, male supremacy, or I don't know, that's not even a thing.
The whole male, yeah.
But, and then you mentioned Women's Equality Day. I don't know if you want to talk about that
I
for
didn't
a
even know
second.
that was a thing, and that I feel like that's a new thing, and people are gonna be like, oh, actually it's been, I'm like, there's so many. Okay, you know how people say, I mean, what is it, Margaret Thatcher, and of course you're gonna be feminists who are like rolling their eyes, like the fact that if you have to call yourself a lady, then you're probably not one. Yeah, maybe this is the same thing applies here, that, you know, we have all these days of Women's Empowerment Day. It's like, isn't it supposed to be every single day? Because I've never heard of Women's Equality Day.
I know.
There's so many. There's International Day of the Woman, and like, you know, the fact that, you know, the, what is it, the 99th anniversary of the
like
what am I thinking
suffrage.
of? Yeah, women's
Yeah,
suffrage, and then even in Wyoming, 150th year for that. Like, there's a lot of things that are happening this year, but thankfully I live in my little circle of friends who think gun rights are women's rights, and so I saw a lot of those
because they're
photos today,
intelligent.
so that was great. So good on you guys.
Yeah, well, the only thing I saw about that was there was a really cringy video with a bunch of celebrities talking about how, you know, we've been a country for 208 years, and like women still don't have equality, and it's like, okay, as an attorney, it just is so infuriating because we did get the right to vote with women's suffrage, but also it seems like these people have never read the 14th Amendment. They don't know that it exists. They don't know that there's equal treatment under the law for all persons. It doesn't just say for men. It says for all persons. So that includes women. Unless they think that women aren't persons, then the 14th Amendment applies, and we have equality under the law in this country. So it just shows how ignorant these celebrities are, and they're pushing for laws that already exist.
Well, they're just mad about the whole equal rights amendment that they still haven't been able to get through. Well, it passed the House, and then it never passed the Senate, so it's something they still want.
It's just entirely
in the law.
superfluous, though, you know, because we have an equal rights amendment. It's the 14th Amendment. It's called it's actually, I think
no, it's not good enough.
It's not good enough.
It has to be something they pushed, right? And they want to win.
And it has to have the word woman in it, even though the
Right.
word man doesn't appear in the Constitution once. Sorry, that's just a fun side note for that. But anyway, I know I get on a rant about that, but it's one of those things where if we don't understand what the law actually says, then we can't even begin to propose new laws. You know,
Right.
especially when it comes to constitutional law. Like, if you haven't even read the Bill of Rights and or just the constitutional amendments, like, forget all of the powers in the first three articles of the Constitution. But if you can't read the amendments and just understand your rights before trying to push nationwide legislation, then I don't know. I just don't care about your opinion. And I'll get off my high horse.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is a great segue to talking to Emily. Who's
Yeah.
a Patriot Panda on, all social media, I'm guessing. But you're mostly on Instagram, right?
Yep, just
Mostly on Instagram. Okay, so thank you for coming on our show and being here in person. A lot more fun to be live.
Yeah,
and
I know,
a lot
right?
less technical issues. So we just wanted our audience to get to know you a little bit more. I'm sure a lot of people do know you already, but if you can talk about more like your story, like how you even got to being a pro Second Amendment person in the first place, and where you're at right now.
So I was adopted at 2.5 from China, and I feel like I've always been like kind of interested in American history just because it fascinates me. And so, I mean, I grew up in a household with guns, but it was mostly like hunting and stuff, and so I hadn't really like paid attention to it. And then a couple of years ago, I mean, I heard like social media like, oh, the assault weapons, they're bad. And so then a couple of years ago, I shot my first AR-15, and I was like, this isn't nothing. Like, what are these people scared of? And so then I kind of just started getting involved in politics because I just saw where Colorado was headed because I've lived in Colorado since I was 2.5, and I love this great state.
Me
And-
too, for sure.
And so I
Yeah,
see
it's
these like laws passing.
Whatever, girl. Whatever, girl.
Sorry. Continue.
Edgar's pissed. Edgar's ticked off.
I'm kidding. I love you.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry,
dear.
yeah. Go ahead.
And I'm like, wait, they keep wanting to change my state, and it's like I've always been interested in like the American Revolution and stuff, because it's like, yeah, we need our freedoms, because it's like I came from China where it was like they had the law about you could only have one child, and so I think that's, we're not sure exactly, but I think that's how I ended up like in an orphanage, is
Wow.
because they already had one kid, and mostly families will choose to keep a son because they're more useful, and so you like during like the area where I was born, you'd have a lot of girls in orphanages, and so I feel like I've been super blessed to have the opportunity to come to the U.S. and experience freedom and have like a second chance at life, and so it's like I want to be able to preserve that freedom, because I'd hate to see America go in the same direction where we have so much government overreach, where they are dictating who can and can't have children, and end up in the same situation as China, because it's like I don't want to go back to that.
Right. And, you know, and a lot of people in America will, and so we're getting political a little bit, but, you know, I think people just think, oh, well, China, yeah, they just have so much government overreach, and man, we're just so lucky to be here. But there's so many things that, unfortunately, like with surveillance and like, you know, maybe it's not as conspicuous as or obvious as it is in China. And we're going to talk more about that in Hong Kong later on. But, you know, I'm with Travis, my husband, all the time. I talk about the fact that, you know, it's just crazy to me that no one cares that much. The fact that you don't really own anything, the fact that, you know, property,
right? Oh my God, thank you.
We're thinking about selling our home, and the fact that there's a capital gains tax, you know, that the fact that just because I don't want to use that money that I gained a profit from selling my home and then using it for something else, I have to be taxed on that.
Not to mention just to own the home. Like,
Right,
you don't
exactly.
actually own
Never.
real estate in America because there's property taxes.
Right.
So,
And
and you don't own your labor because there's an income tax.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
And I'm not saying it's the
a whole rant I
exact
can go
same
on.
thing, but it's just, I feel like people just automatically assume like, oh, well, we have nothing associated, you know, nothing in common. But it's important to look at other countries and see, I guess, where we don't want to be headed, but where like we might already be heading in that direction, but we don't see it because we're blind to it. So it's just like really great to have like a unique perspective. And I don't know, like, have you been back there since you were adopted? Okay.
Really? Interesting. Do you want to go back, or would you like to go back?
I kind of sit on the fence about wanting to go back, because I think it would be good to, you know, experience more of the culture from where I came from, but it's also kind of like scary because it's just like
What you see, what's going on, and
Yeah.
everything. Right. Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious, you know, what would scare you about going back, or what are some of the problems you see with the culture and the politics and the government happening out there?
I think just the like oppression that you see is just the whole like social media stuff, the regulating, and now they've got the face scanners.
I know. That's so scary.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. And I feel the same way. So for those who don't know, my parents are Nigerian immigrants. So I'm first generation. And so, I mean, that's why I'm like trying to give her a break too, because I'm like can be the Chinese expert, and like I'm not the Nigerian expert just because that's where I come from. But it does give you a different perspective because for me at least, because you're adopted, so it wouldn't be that case. But for me, my parents are immigrants, so I in a way feel like I'm one just because of they are living life through those eyes and that perspective, and so you're a child of that, and you get to hear the stories and stuff like that. And the same thing with Nigeria, the corruption that's happened there, and with the government as well. And so there's a lot of overlap with that. But I also think it gives you a perspective of why you love America even more. Like why you should. Because my mom still to this day drives on roads and is like, wow, paved roads. Like,
Yeah,
this is awesome. You know, like things like
Yeah.
that gives you a different perspective.
I think it's different, yeah, because they, experienced it firsthand, but I was so young, I don't really remember much about China. So I think actually it would be a good idea for me to go back so I can appreciate America more than I already do.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's possible enough. But
right.
I don't know if this is like considered racist, but I call myself a Twinkie because I'm yellow on the outside, but I'm white on the inside.
I'm an Oreo, self-proclaimed Oreo, guys. So I understand that one.
And I'm just an Oreo, like, just straight up, because I've got the white and black happening, like, 50-50 anyway.
Right, you just got the mix.
not
But I
even
feel like
an
you're not
inside
really
thing.
an Oreo because you're a mixture. We're going to get into that.
Yeah, what am I, like, I don't know, like chocolate milk?
Chocolate milk.
At least chocolate milk's tasty.
Oreos are tasty. Okay, now we're getting into
I mean, all of it is. I'm
Speaking
just
of
saying.
food, Popeyes and ChickfilA.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We were going to talk about that briefly before we get into the heavy
Yes, before we get into that
stuff. Although, you had said you had never been to Popeyes,
Oh,
I've
right, Emily?
never been to
Guys,
Popeyes.
this lady has never been to Popeyes. And
So-
that is why I say sometimes about Colorado. Because that's what I keep,
But
the comments I've
girl.
heard. And
I'm
people
a
that are
co-
appreciating Popeyes here.
I'm a Colorado native, and I've had plenty of Popeyes.
Okay,
alright?
wow.
And right, Edgar? Yeah, he's nodding, thumbs up. Yeah.
But you're the fool who was commenting, saying that Chick-fil-A was better than Popeyes.
No, the sandwich. Just the sandwich.
Have you had the Popeyes sandwich?
Not yet.
I knew it. Okay, I'm telling you guys, if you haven't had the sandwich, then you can't.
But it's
Chick-fil-A
like-
is good,
it's
but
like-
the
it's
sandwich
like-
was not the same.
It's just amazing.
Peanut oil, man. It's the
Is
peanut
that
oil.
why? It's the seasoning. It really is the
Yeah.
seasoning.
I mean, that's what makes fried chicken. I'm so sorry, Emily.
no, she can't be a part of this debate because she doesn't have it Popeyes. But you've had Chick-fil-A though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's the Lord's chicken. Like you think
Yeah.
it's okay. All right. Well, I'm just a traitor to
Protestant
America. Sorry,
chicken.
guys. Okay. I'm sorry.
You're not a traitor to America.
Okay. all right.
I want to try I haven't tried the chicken sandwich from Popeyes, so I want to try that before I opine.
Okay. Okay. Good.
But I have to say that the peanut oil, like Chick-fil-A knows what they're doing in terms of making fried chicken. Like there's a reason why people like
you
it.
call it fried chicken?
Well, I probably
feel
wouldn't
like-
call it fried chicken.
Okay, yeah, that
like
was
in front of my
crossing the
like
line there a
Texas
little bit.
parents, like I don't think I would, but they do technically fry it, which is why I said that.
I
They
feel
have
like
chicken,
it's
they fry
too like soft to be considered real like fried chicken.
It doesn't have the like crispy, like you almost can break into it
Yeah.
type thing.
I
Yeah,
feel like
which
a part of it has to be bone in too.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm not the dictator of what is fried chicken and what is not, but I feel like there's some things like black people should have black privilege on some stuff.
fried chicken's one of
like,
those
yeah.
things.
That's strike 4.
Edgar, I told you you don't have a male voice, but it's Women's Equality Day.
On Women's Equality Day, only we get to talk
Yes.
about Popeyes.
About
damn it.
ridiculously racist things that we think we could say because we're black. I could say. Anyways.
Hey.
Okay, okay, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
we love each other.
Oh,
I'm,
yes, it's
I'm
true.
actually gonna be her bridesmaid. So if I say
It's
anything,
true.
please know that we do love each
Yeah,
other.
we're really close. It's okay.
For now, I did buy my dress, so we're good. I
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
it comes in.
It'll
But
be in no time.
yeah, so the Popeyes Chick-fil-A thing, and also, do you guys know that they just low key also brought in mac and cheese at Chick-fil-A?
Oh, they did? They
it's
snuck
so
it in?
good.
I will, Edgar. You are so. This is when the patriarchy is correct. the male cheese, the mac and cheese,
Oh my god.
the mac
gonna
and
be
cheese
comments
is
in the chat about
delicious
that.
in Chick-fil-A. So Chick-fil-A, I will say you had that.
Is it good?
Right.
I was
Yeah.
skeptical. Yeah?
It's good.
No, it's good.
I'm getting some on the way home.
Have you ever been to Raising Cane's?
I haven't. I've seen it though.
I have.
It looked like a place that wasn't a restaurant, but then I saw a drive-through and I was confused.
So it's supposed to be like compared to Zaxby's.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Oh. Okay.
It's got pretty good chicken though there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give it a try. I'll take your word for it, Emily. I'm open to the chicken experience.
Okay. So
Next
a
podcast,
Mexican,
you'll
a
just go
mixed
to
girl, a black girl, and a Chinese immigrant come into a two-way podcast and talk about fried chicken. Okay. So I just wanted to go that's what we're talking about.
We
Okay,
still have people
next
watching.
thing.
That's all that matters.
Okay, is there any comments or questions that we have?
Yeah, before I get into Hong Kong, because I'll have a whole,
Yeah.
it'll be a whole thing.
Don't worry, it goes back down.
So
Yeah.
the comment was the gay mafia is real. That's by the Second Liberty Gun Club.
That's true.
Um,
Can the audience hear you, you think?
maybe a little bit, but not much.
Okay, I'm just wondering if we should repeat what you're saying.
Oh, yeah,
You
sorry.
can.
Okay. Yeah, so Second Liberty Gun Club said the
Oh,
gay
yeah.
mafia is real. And yeah, I do think that's true. I don't think that it's like everyone in the LGBT community, but I do think that there's an active push in that community to do some pretty crazy things among the more extremists.
Yeah, Rob Smith talks about that a lot from
Oh, yeah.
Turning Point USA. He's
I like him a
West
lot.
Point, black conservative gay, and he talks about how like he is just sick of it, and you know they had their own agenda because for the most part they got what they wanted, marriage equality, right? But then they had to
They're not
come
happy,
up with all
though.
these other things to be like, no, we're not equal because of that. Same thing with the feminist movement, but
Mm-hmm. I know.
And then the other comment, there's another one. One mentioned Whataburger chicken sandwich on Texas toast.
is the same.
sounds gross.
Guys, I'm a native Texan, and you can't. You brought it.
You're
and also
putting a
all
chicken
the-
sandwich on Texas toast, homie?
No, it's good. It is good, but comparing it,
Mm.
I don't know if this person's saying that it is better or just comparable.
Like, or maybe they're asking what we think about that. I don't know.
No, it's just a statement.
oh, okay. Well,
Okay, well,
we don't like your
Yeah.
statement.
I've never tried that, and I probably wouldn't.
So,
I don't know.
and
It's actually
then
good.
I'm sure the white males in this podcast
Oh.
are bringing up that today's National Dog Day, not National Equality Day.
Oh, of course
okay.
you guys would.
Yeah, there's some.
Everyone knows. Well, actually, no, I'm not gonna say that.
I was just gonna say that in case people can't hear Edgar, he said that there's some people in the chat
Yeah.
mentioning how it's actually National Dog Day, not Women's Equality Day, and that's really what we should be focusing on. But I feel like all of these labels are a little arbitrary. You
Yeah,
know?
no, I did see it, and a lot more guys were talking about the dog part. So
Of
the
course.
National Dog Day. So you were right, Edgar, when you brought up the whole gender and sex thing. Sorry, gender and race thing. Two genders.
Gender and sex.
That the white males are really into the National Dog Day.
Mhm.
No,
Really important.
I don't know if they can see it.
Oh.
Oh, that is not. Oh, so that's what Google has confirmed that
Oh.
is the only holiday today.
Yeah, because Google doesn't ever cater
No.
results.
Absolutely.
To a
Obviously, they're
particular
sexist, so
ideology
we're gonna
ever.
make sure that people know about that. I'm gonna make sure Women's March knows about that. So, anyways, Google. So yeah, what were we even getting into? Why are we even getting?
Well,
into
we
this?
were
Oh,
just
getting
going
into
through
Hong
audience
Kong.
questions
Yeah,
before
oh, yeah.
Hong Kong.
Okay. Are there anything else before we move on? 'Cause we're talking about Hong Kong people, so you guys better be ready.
I know,
There's-
buckle up.
One comment that I'm not gonna mention.
Is it rude?
Did someone call us shills again?
No. Do you
Good.
gals believe?
I'm not
No,
looking
it's just men being men.
Okay, cool.
Oh.
Do you gals believe that all of our gun rights can be taken away from us?
Um,
And
You
if
wanna
so,
s-
what would happen if they tried?
Could all of our Second Amendment rights be taken away from us?
and if so, what would happen? Is that what he said?
No, I
What
don't.
would happen if they tried?
Oh,
Oh,
if they
I think they could try to take it away, but it's one of those.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
it's-
should let you talk first. I don't know why I was
go
jumping.
ahead. No.
It's one of those things where you have the God-given right to it no
Right.
matter what the government
Mhm.
says. So they could write some law saying that you don't have the right under the Second Amendment, but you still have the right to defend yourself with whatever means are equal, force to whatever you're being approached with. And that's just by nature of your humanity. So no one can really take that away. However, they can try to infringe upon it, and they do all the time, and they want to more. I don't know. I feel like if they passed some kind of nationwide gun confiscation thing, I just think a lot of people wouldn't comply, if I'm going to be honest. Kind of like in New Zealand, they passed that buyback program, and it was something like less than 2% of the guns in New Zealand actually were turned in. And I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Well,
But that was-
you can look at the red flag laws that have already been passed and how many people they come in to confiscate their guns and they're like no, and they end up shooting the person, and it's like, so they end up dead anyways, which defeats the purpose.
The whole purpose of the red flag law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the government's doing it for our own protection. Remember, that's what that's why the red flag laws exist, for our own protection. No.
Yeah.
it's for their protection, really. I mean, the whole buyback thing is the same thing. The mentality that they think they give us anything.
Yeah.
They give us our guns. They give us our.
I know,
rights.
like our right to own a gun is something that they gave us, which is just not. It's just ridiculous. But I also think that there's so many guns in America. Even if that happened, we would just have a massive black market of weapons, and that would probably be, there'd probably be a lot of violence in that. The same way that with prohibition, with drugs, and with prohibition with alcohol, you saw how much violence was around that. So it's like Al Capone says, as soon as something becomes illegal, that's the business he's in. Or that was one of his quotes, as soon as alcohol became illegal, he's like, I'm in the liquor business.
Your Italian side would want us to bring that up.
But I know, my Sicilian background. But it's... I think it would do a lot more harm than good if they tried. I actually think violence would be much worse if they tried to.
Well, I think
do
they
that.
already are trying. I think they're smart enough to know that they can't just come in and say, I'm going to take your guns, but they are passing these small laws that slowly take it away.
Right.
And we've just been letting it happen because we're like, oh, for example, the bump stocks, it doesn't affect many gun owners, so they're like, oh, that's
I don't have a bump stock, so I won't fight it. But
and I think that's how they're going to end up taking away is the Second Amendment right, is just by
chipping at it.
And it's not even laws per se. I forgot who was talking about it, but basically a lot of these things, same thing with the bump stocks, it wasn't implemented by legislators. It wasn't a bill. It was through the ATF, or it is through the ATF.
Yeah.
And it's all of these
the regulators write it and then put
it
it to Congress, and Congress is just like, whatever, because they do a terrible job.
I mean, that was the same thing with, what was that, with the government, the tax on, well, not even the healthcare one. It was not, that wasn't a law, but most of it it goes through regulation. It's all
or the regulators are the one writing the language.
Right, exactly. Right. So I mean, that's part of it, is we're just focused so much sometimes on the aspect of what's going to pass a law or something like that, but then they go around it.
Yeah, or they do stuff like we were talking about in the TAPS Act, where they just give a blanket pass to the executive branch to do whatever they want.
Okay, so for those who, so I've got since then on the whole Dan Crenshaw saga, I feel like there's always something. And
there's always something with that.
He was on Joe Rogan apparently last week, and some people who are, I'm not saying they're not, but I'm just saying some people, apparently he said something that some people who were adamantly against in the beginning were like, oh, well, the way he said he talked about the TAPS Act, it didn't seem that, bad. And I've gotten several people talking about this and coming to me and saying, actually, it's not that big of a deal. But so we read the TAPS Act, and it's not that hard to read. It's
actually
really,
not that long.
Like a page or something.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not just a page, but
a couple pages.
We're awesome, so we just automatically know that all this stuff, but not really. So really, the TAPS Act is creating a task force that's going to create these best business practices when it comes to how they want red flag laws to be implemented in state by state. But then they also give a budget of up to $25 million. That's not really that much when you think about it.
In the grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
it's
state by state, but it's still the whole thing is that it incentivizes these states that don't already have red flag laws to then have red flag laws
or pass them or whatever.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. And it has to be so that task force, whoever's going to be a part of that task force, is going to get to say this is what needs to be a part of this red flag law. If you're already thinking red flag law, I assure you it's gonna be bad already.
It's gonna be worse.
So it's not,
imagine.
and always even the guy from Maine, the former senator that we had on.
Yeah.
He even said that would be not even an option because it wouldn't be considered a red flag law. So even if you're looking at that route, which again I don't believe that we should have red flag laws, just they're in its makeup is unconstitutional, right?
On a whole bunch of levels, it's unconstitutional.
But yeah, the TAPS Act is incentivizing these states to do something that they're not already doing already. So we should not be on that side. Why are Republicans pushing stuff like that? So please know what that TAPS Act is about. That's what it's about.
Yeah, and don't trust people who say that it's just some kind of innocuous thing that's trying to help people from committing suicide or something. It is so much more broad than that, and it's really dangerous. Republicans should not support stuff like that.
And Colorado is not a good example. If I see that one more time, Colorado is a horrible example.
Yeah, our red flag law in particular is really bad. But I mean, the citizens of our state are ticked off. Like, Polus is gonna get recalled. It's not a it's gonna happen. So, because he's been passing all this mess. I mean, the red flag law is one of several things that he signed that people are upset about. But they've passed enough nonsense across enough spectrums of stuff where there's enough people where I really think our governor is gonna get the boot. Because we do have that power in Colorado at least to kick out our government officials.
Yeah, you guys
if we
do
want.
like recalls here.
Yeah.
However, I don't think that recalling Polus is really going to do that much because I think we should spend more effort on recalling the
actual legislators themselves.
Yeah, the actual legislators. A, because it's easier to do, and B, it's like with Polus, he's got so much money that he can just fight back with all that money. But if we can take out the legislators that have passed these like red flag laws that voted for them, because there were plenty last election, there were plenty of seats that the Republicans could have maintained.
But they didn't even campaign.
Yeah, they did not do a good job, in my opinion, of campaigning, and they lost a bunch of easily keepable seats.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's true. I think the reason why people push for Polus so much is because he's like the biggest fish, to fry, so to speak. It's how
it's a big win if they get the win.
Instead of taking issue with Congress, people are like, just get rid of Trump. It's kind of
right.
like we're just really upset with our government in Colorado, and Polus is kind of like the biggest figurehead of that. I bet a lot of people don't know who their local representatives are. Like I do, and I researched before I voted and all of that, but I bet a lot of people don't even know who they voted for. They probably just voted for like one party or the other.
Do you guys do straight ticket voting here?
What is that? I don't know.
No, you don't, because you guys do it based on the ballot of them sending it, like what you're registered with, right? So if you're a registered Republican, you're gonna get the Republican.
Oh, for the primaries?
Right, yeah.
They actually changed it so that you get both, but you only get to vote in one.
If you're unregistered.
Yeah. And then if you're registered for one, you only get the one. But if you're an independent like me, I got both, but I was dumb and I actually sent both in, so I canceled them out. They don't count it if you do both. So I was like, wow, that was stupid. I researched all the candidates on from both sides and was trying to pick the most sane ones possible on both the Democrat and Republican side. I wasted so much time.
Well, now
anyway,
you know for yourself.
Yeah, I know. Next time I won't do that. But yeah,
that's what happens when you educate yourself. It's ridiculous.
I know. If I had just read the fine print on the ballot, I wouldn't have done that. But do we have any other audience questions before we get into Hong Kong, or what do you think? Or comments that are
just get into Hong Kong.
Intriguing?
Who cares about our audience?
There's one common comment that I think is bullshit.
Oh.
Cool. What is it?
And that's the idea that sheriffs in Colorado.
Oh, someone's trying to.
Oh, I don't know if the ticket. The idea that sheriff's office won't enforce those laws.
Oh, the sanctuary cities for the red flag laws.
Can you say what he said or she said, so that way you don't want? Is it laden with?
I think a lot of sheriffs and even states would refuse to comply outright.
Oh.
Okay.
I think me personally, I think that's
Wait,
bullshit.
Edgar, get on the mic. Oh shoot!
Whoa.
Sorry.
No, it's messed up.
I messed it up. Sorry, that was my fault. I was like, because he's talking, so I wanted to be on the mic.
I mean, basically what Edgar was saying, for people who couldn't hear, was that someone in the comments said, I don't think that sheriffs, would enforce these red flag laws in effect, or that local law enforcement would, and he says that he thinks that's bullshit. I think some sheriffs might not, but I think there's a lot that would.
Well, Colorado, how many counties have declared themselves as 2A
we had
sanctuary?
There's a
3
lot of them.
dozen that said no, they would not enforce it, or they will not enforce it. There we go.
That's what they said with the magazine bill. And guess how many have already done it?
Oh, really?
So I think it's bullshit. Just because we don't hear about it on the news, 11 times that the magazine bill has been enforced in the state of Colorado, and some of those were enforced by counties that said they wouldn't enforce it.
Okay, but
This is why I don't trust the government, guys.
so, but can it change sheriff by sheriff though? Like when a new sheriff comes in,
I mean, yeah.
new sheriff in town.
Yeah. Sheriffs are actually quite powerful, which is good in some ways and bad in other ways.
Right. Yeah. That's the.
So I'm wondering if, say, the red flag law becomes like a federal law, if what the implications would, how that would change for counties that just state that they're not going to enforce it. Because we've got the trouble with ICE and like counties not saying that, and then them risking losing funding. So I wonder if it'd be the same thing.
Well, that's where that TAPS thing, like that's gonna be. I think that's where they're gonna, if they do enforce something like that, they're gonna say these are the rules. Like, they always try to tie federal funding to something. They have control over them. Like that's how it works.
But at the same time, the states actually do have a lot of power. It's like the whole marijuana thing.
Edgar, do you have something? Sorry.
Because,
okay.
Because federally marijuana is still classified the same as heroin. But how many states have it where recreational? I mean, obviously we're in Colorado. So, but how many states, where you can just walk in and it's not even just like medical anymore. Like a lot of states have recreational marijuana, and it's completely different than the federal law. And that's actually how prohibition ended too. Certain states just stopped actually enforcing prohibition. And when enough states did that, eventually Congress kind of did something about it. So I just think that hopefully enough states wouldn't enforce the red flag laws, but I'm not confident.
One more for you guys.
Okay.
What do you guys think the likelihood of secession happening in the next 10 years is?
Secession, Colorado?
I'm assuming just in general.
I think they're probably talking about just in general. It kind of depends. Well, do you want to answer first? Sorry.
No, you answer, because I
always have
really thought that. Okay, I'm not getting it wrong when it comes to.
I think it depends on how extreme the culture war gets with like Antifa and stuff. Like if Antifa groups get really out of control in some states, and/or if there are some really intense Second Amendment stuff, like not just the red flag law, but if there is a confiscation bill or something like that passed, I think you might see some states try to secede.
Okay, that's what I meant. It's by state. That's what I was
I thought you meant like Colorado specifically, if Colorado has a secession movement. But like if any state might. And I actually think that if Trump gets reelected, I mean, I don't know if this is going to happen, but if Trump gets reelected and some of these leftist states are crazy enough, they might try to get out too, because they're pulling out all the stops with some of this stuff with Trump. Like they're trying to abolish the Electoral College. They're trying to, they are just so desperate to not live in Trump's America that I don't know. I wouldn't put it past California or like Washington State or Oregon, like just that whole West Coast thing. I wouldn't put it past one of those states to be like, no, we're just out. 'Cause 10 years is a long time, especially in our current cultural climate. I think back to 2009 and where we are now. I mean, the country is completely different, and so I don't know. I don't know how likely it is. Since 2009, I think we've gone. I don't think it's good. People are the collective loss of mind is really extreme compared to like 2009, right? Like the amount of people who are just completely politically insane is so much higher.
Right.
Well, like in Colorado, I would have never thought that we would be fighting to keep the Electoral College, but
I know, right?
We got enough petition votes petition signatures to put the
that's gonna be on the ballot, right?
The national popular vote on there.
Yes, good.
So all you Colorado voters need to vote no and save the Electoral College.
Because don't you want our state to have a say in who the president is? Seems relevant. The president's really powerful.
Well, same thing with Tabor, the whole taxpayer Bill of Rights.
Oh yeah, they want to get rid of that.
That's under attack.
They're trying to destroy that ASAP.
They want, and that's the thing, is it's just so obvious. Like literally the difference is that the politicians want control back to be able to increase or decrease your, not decrease because you can decrease it, but increase your taxes. And that's what this fight is about. Yeah. Which I don't understand anyone who's like, yeah, I want my politics. Well, then again, it's this whole electoral college thing, right? It's like the mentality that you believe I need to give some of my rights away to this elitist for, because they're better, because they were voted in. They're a better human being, and so therefore I trust this person to make decisions for me. Like that's the idea. That's the thinking behind that.
We definitely shift from this where it's supposed to be, they represent the people to the people giving them power because the people don't want the responsibility.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't want to have the responsibility of liberty, which is why this stuff happens all the time. People are very happy to have someone else make decisions for them most of the time. The only problem with that is that, you end up with a government that is just horrible and destroys all the people who want to be free, because there are a lot of people who want to be free, and the people who want to be free are the producers and the creators and if all of us just wanted to kowtow to the government, I mean that's what happens in communism and other stuff, which is, I guess we could talk about Hong Kong if you want.
I was going to say that's a great segue to Hong Kong.
Because that's pretty much what's happening there. It's like your individuality in communism is just not a thing, because you have to sacrifice the individual to the collective in communism, always.
All right, so we're going to talk about Hong Kong. We're going to go into the Liberty Report with Nina.
Oh, God.
Nina, can you take us away on the Hong Kong?
Oh gosh. Yeah, so
situation?
I actually spent a decent amount of time today learning about Hong Kong. I didn't know the history of it very much, but I think the year was 1984. Hong Kong used to be owned by like Great Britain or the UK or whatever, and they ended up kind of having a deal with China where Hong Kong got to maintain most of its autonomy, but would effectively become a part of China, technically. But it wouldn't be communist. It was something like they're 3/4 of the way. They're 3/4 of the way autonomous is what they phrased it as. And so that's been a thing since the 80s. But more recently, there was a bill that the Hong Kong government proposed, and they proposed this bill because there was like some Taiwanese guy who committed a murder allegedly and I'm so sorry if I have these facts wrong, just I'm sorry, audience. Okay, I'm winging it. I read all these articles, I'm trying to remember everything I read, but there was a murder that happened in Hong Kong, and the Chinese government, I guess, wasn't able to extradite, which is essentially just a fancy word for the government going into, or rather bringing in, an individual from a different jurisdiction into their jurisdiction to prosecute them. That's what extradition is. So they weren't able to extradite this Taiwanese guy who was accused of murder, and so the Hong Kong government was like, oh, well, we'll just have this extradition compact with China, where they can come and extradite our citizens for things that are crimes in China. And initially, I mean, the Hong Kong government tried to pose that as like, this is just a way to make sure that we're not a haven for criminals,
right?
I
wonder, sorry, just
no, go ahead, interrupt me anytime.
In the language, or I don't know if you saw it or anything, did it say anything about like especially heinous like type of crimes, like the really bad crimes? Those are the ones that we want to, or was it just like any crime?
Well, I think that's why there was so much pushback, was because it was really vague. And so
I'm trying to connect the two. If you know.
Yeah. Really vague laws are really freaking dangerous.
Sure.
So obviously the critics of the bill are, it's kind of what you were just getting into. They were saying it's too vague, and that in effect, it's another chip away from Hong Kong's autonomy, because in effect what this means is that the Chinese government could, like, they didn't even have restrictions on just Hong Kong citizens. It was anyone who was in Hong Kong. Like, if you were just traveling for Hong Kong for business, you would come under the purview of this bill. And so, with China, they have all of these, it's a communist country. They've got like social media scoring and other things that affect how, not everyone in China is subject to that kind of social media monitoring, but it's kind of a nightmarish thing happening in China. And as a communist nation, you know, they're not a big fan of dissidents. And I don't know how much I've talked about this on this podcast, but China actually does have camps where they put Christians and Muslims and try to re-educate them. And if they don't get re-educated, then, you know, they kind of just disappear. So, and it's interesting that it's like Muslims and Christians and Jews or whatever all in the same kind of place in that regard, because in communism,
atheist,
you can't have a religion because that, you know, might compete with the state. So the whole idea is that if all of a sudden Hong Kong, which has been sort of this, I mean, bastion of capitalism is probably too strong, but economically speaking, it's been very prosperous. And it's because it's not communist, you know, like it's right next to China, but it's not communist. And they have all of these, they actually benefit the world economy immensely. Like Hong Kong's a big part of the world economy. But in effect, what they're saying is even though Hong Kong's been this relatively free place, under this bill, it's possible for all of China's laws, all of their communist laws, all of their stuff about social media, all of their censorship laws, all of that, to all of a sudden be grounds to extradite anyone who's in Hong Kong and just bring them into China to be subject to their laws. And so this bill, which apparently the government in Hong Kong, I think, has either since, and again, I'm sorry if I'm wrong about this, but they've either since rewritten the bill to try to be more specific and then pitch it again, or they've just completely scrapped it. I don't recall. But one of the things that's crazy about this is even with the Hong Kong government trying to make changes, China's government is still like, they've got tanks going to the Hong Kong border. Like I saw this video of just a fleet of tanks just like driving to Hong Kong. And I saw a video of, you know, some of these protests. And obviously, I don't condone violent protests. Unless the police have actively just started being violent to you, you shouldn't be violent, like, to a police officer. Like, if you're protesting, you should be peaceful. And some of these people aren't doing that. But at the same time, you know, the police in some of these instances, they've been using water cannons. There was active fire. I'm not sure if they actually fired into the crowd or if they just fired straight up into the air. But there was active fire, like not rubber bullets, like actual guns going on. And some of these videos are pretty scary to see. I mean, it's one of those things like we think about our Second Amendment, because the people in Hong Kong, they're not fighting with guns. You know, they're like throwing glass bottles and like rocks and like sticks and crap. Like they're not. That's one of the things. It's like you couldn't even get to this place where you're having to violent or like riot or protest with like sticks if you have the Second Amendment. Anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But it's pretty crazy. And something too that's interesting about this is the response from both the left and the right regarding these protests in Hong Kong. Because they are like, some of the Hong Kong protesters, I guess, were waving an American flag and saying like, Trump, please come, like, help us.
Singing the national anthem.
Singing the American national anthem. And so now all of these leftists who used to, or like who's very recently were like, you know, maybe marching in a march that's like, what do we want? Like dead cops, like when do we want them now? Or like, hey, these cops are keeping the peace. You know, like these are like violent, you know, white supremacist nationalists who are just, you know, hurting these poor cops who are trying to, you know, protect, I don't know, some nonsense.
Oh yeah, like, well, okay, this is a very small example, but apparently there's a live action film of Mulan coming out.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The actress, did you hear about that? Mm-hmm. The actress was pro, like, was saying how in Chinese, of course, she thought like no one's gonna look at what she was saying, but someone found it, and like, lo and behold, they know Chinese and English. It's crazy. So they interpreted it, and it seemed like basically she was saying that she was pro Hong Kong police, and I'm in support of them, and what they're doing is wrong, and these protesters are doing what they're doing is wrong. And so they've had calls for not protest, but
they were gonna boycott the Mulan movie.
Boycott Mulan, which I didn't even know about the movie until that happened.
Well, they're doing live actions of like everything. You can just assume any Disney movie you love, they're destroying with a live action. Like,
and then there's some reason we're gonna have to boycott it. For one reason or another.
And it'll outrage exactly. Whatever live action that is outraging somebody, and there will be a boycott for it. But yeah, I remember that. So yeah, there's been people. It's really strange because it's barely being covered. But at the same time, people have like really passionate opinions about it. Right. It's like either these are like, you know, these are just rioters who need to be put in their place, and like thank God for the Hong Kong government for, you know, establishing like law and order again. But then there's people who are like, no, these are like pro-democracy people who are fighting for freedom and fighting against communism. And you know, personally, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is another country. Like, I don't know. I really hope we don't get involved.
Yeah, I don't think we should get involved. But I support them fighting for their freedom.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Me too. I mean, yeah, I support the whole idea of, you know, the right to self-determination as an entity. And I do think Hong Kong, you know, if they want to self-determine, they should be able to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention about the response is that I was listening to a video Tim Pool did, and I guess like journalists who have been trying to fly to Hong Kong to cover it have been getting detained like at the airport and like arrested and just kind of disappeared, so to speak. So it's one of those things where we're probably not even getting like even one of the videos that we have footage from is actually just camera footage from one of those face scanning cameras that look right. It's so creepy to me, but one of those face scanning cameras, you know, was filming all these people walking around, but it's like they actually got some of the protests, so that's how we have some of the footage, is because of these like what they called it, like a smart pole. Like, it's not a telephone pole, but it's a pole that can just like scan your face and watch you. So but this is, I don't know, all of this stuff really scares me. It just scares me a lot. But I also think it's important, and then I'll stop ranting about it, we can just chat. But I think it's important to think about the implications of if for some reason China decides that this is an opportunity to kind of take away all the autonomy that Hong Kong has. The implications for the world economy on that are a big deal, because I don't know if it was Trump or if it was just someone in his administration, but someone was already saying that if that extradition bill became law, Hong Kong's unique status as being thought of as separate from China for economic purposes and trade purposes might just go away. And if you think, like, you don't really think about it in the grand scheme of things because we're in America, but in terms of the world economy, Hong Kong is a big hub, especially in Asia. And if Hong Kong all of a sudden is not a hub for, you know, economic prosperity or for trade in Asia, I mean, that the whole Asian economic system is going to be just rocked. And if the Asian economic system is going to be rocked, I mean, our debt is mostly held by China. So if that gets rocked, then we get rocked too. And if our economy gets rocked, then the whole world, you know, has problems, which probably will happen anyway because of our debt and because of a whole bunch of other things. But I think it's important to realize that it's not like Hong Kong is just this isolated thing that wouldn't, like, if something happens where Hong Kong's economy gets messed up, that'll affect the whole world. So
but unfortunately sometimes people use that same argument to interfere into their
to justify
stuff, if it gets into,
intervention.
You know, if they get, so it's just, I mean, that's part of it. And especially, I mean, they have to, and I don't agree with any intervention, that we shouldn't be a part of it, but we should support as much as we can. Also, again, boycott when there's a government that's trying to take away their rights. But we're now in a tariff war right now anyways, trade war with China, so that's what we're focused
smart.
on.
Let's start a trade war with the people that own our debt. That's really smart. But yeah, and I also think, I don't know, it's not a matter of wanting to intervene, but I do think that there's something to be said about the fact that it's not being reported very much. Like, it's not that we should intervene because it can affect us so much, but because it can affect us so much, we really should be talking about it. And a lot of this stuff became big news when it was like Chris Cuomo was talking about Fredo, or like Fredo was trending because he was trying to say that, like, someone called him Fredo and he said that was a slur. And that was our news cycle. Like, when all of this is happening. That's what we were focused on.
That's most of mainstream media, though. I mean, especially in America, and I see it now. A lot of people from other countries tell us that same thing, that they get a lot more of what's happening in America, because they say the same thing with the actors and accents, why there's a lot more British actors who can get the American accent versus us. It's a lot harder for us to get the British accent or a different accent, because most of our, you know, our media or our news or whatever is very American centric. But I mean, even think about, you can't even go to the news and any major outlet and maybe you'll get something past Trump, right? Maybe in America,
maybe 50-50.
But you're not going to hear anything outside of America, and so you don't know what's going on. And so that's what one of my beefs about that is that, like, yeah, we don't know much about foreign policy because of that. Because we're, for one, only talking about Trump, but two, we're always talking about very little when it comes to what's going on around the world.
Yeah, our cultural battle is so powerful right now that people are just not paying attention to like really big issues.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on this, Emily? I know we've been talking a lot.
Yeah, we've been using our, I don't say our privilege, but
host privilege.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just didn't want to not.
I don't know. I haven't really been paying attention to the Hong Kong stuff because, as you said, it doesn't really pop up much.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that the big image, the big, visual singing that those millions, but more than a million people marching.
Yeah, those pictures were something else.
And I think Americans should look at that and say, like, wow, how beautiful. Yeah, obviously, like, yeah, the freedoms that we have that we're not, imagine us marching on the red flag bill, but you know what, to be honest, it's the same thing. It's still freedom, it's still liberty. And someone might say that's outrageous, and Tony, but that's still the same concept. Like, here are people are marching over, that's a pretty big deal, but that is a liberty aspect, right? Like, the same thing should be, and we should have probably the same type of marches, the size that we have. 1.7 million in Hong Kong. I'm forgetting what the actual population is.
Oh yeah,
but
I could probably look that up. Or
that's probably way more than majority. And so versus us, who is over 300 million, right? And we don't have a million people marching over one possible law going into effect. So
although
7.4 million.
7 point.
And
Wow.
that's it from 2017.
Wow. So it was
million.
more than a seventh of their population was out. Wow. But yeah, that's true. I forget who was talking about this, but I was listening to a podcast or a YouTube video or something where they were saying that because of how spread out America is, it actually makes it a lot harder for us to do stuff like that. Because if you wanna do a march, like maybe it's in DC or something, there might be a ton of people across the country who care and who want to be there, but they can't afford to get to DC.
True.
Or they can't go that one weekend or something. So
yeah, and Hong Kong's a lot.
Well, how many?
I know Hong Kong's a lot smaller than America.
How many people have said they're gonna storm Area 51 if we could get all those people to?
The memes from
But the
that were
Vegas
so
flights are not
funny.
cheap right now, so that's why I don't
know.
go.
Also, don't storm a military base.
Yeah,
like
if we
we
could take all of that like drive and motivation to put it towards something useful, march for our rights, not to go find aliens.
I know, and it's interesting because even like the Women's March, they had a bunch of them all across the country, but it wasn't one united giant march in one place. It's like there were various different marches.
Well, it depends what giant means.
Yeah, well, I guess
the first
like,
one was pretty big. I was at that one.
Like the one in DC, but even then,
that was like 500,000. I think.
Yeah, like it's. I just
right.
still, in the grand scheme of things, like to get 1.5 million people marching for the same thing in the same place in America is, I don't know, it's hard to imagine, and I think it's partially because of our geography.
All right.
Is something okay, Edgar? Or everything okay over there?
I'm just scared.
You're scared?
Wondering if I can talk.
Oh yeah, yes.
Here, you want to take
Permission
this
to
mic?
speak?
You want my
Permission to
mic back home?
Yeah, you give him the mic because I mess it up when I do it.
All right. Question between Venezuela and Hong Kong and the news.
Oh.
Is there any headway to make with anti-gun types to realize how important our 2A really is?
Brazil.
What?
The headway meaning, is there like any hope, like in like what?
I think they're saying, like, do you think that all of this stuff happening in Venezuela and Hong Kong will help people in America appreciate their Second Amendment more?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I haven't seen any increase in, not because of that.
Freedom.
Yeah, I feel like people are so, again, we don't hear about it a lot in the news and stuff, so we as Americans are so disconnected, and we get the argument a lot of, that would never happen to us, because we've got
Until
this government structure that's different from theirs. But
Yeah, or I can't believe how many people are like, that could never happen. We have the Second Amendment. It's like, It's like,
and then they choose
have
not
you
to carry.
seen what they did to the Fourth Amendment? Like, it got destroyed. The Fifth Amendment, like, it's gone. Anyway.
Well, but also the Second Amendment is only as good as the people who exercise those rights too. I mean, yes, obviously, if you're criminal because you can't, then that's part of it. But if you're just those people I can't stand who are like, oh, well, that's never gonna happen because us citizens are, it's like, so do you carry anything? Like, do you have something
so
in your home?
cringy.
You're like, no, I don't.
It's like, yeah, that's why you said that, because you don't have a
if
weapon.
something happens, you're going down. Sorry, bud. Like, you had that right, but at the end of the day, it's not like we can help you out. It's not some public good when it comes to that. Like, it's gonna come down to the individual when it comes to that scenario. But I mean that's part of it. Is just you have to exercise your rights as well as fight for them.
And unfortunately, I don't think that people, or I don't think the average person interprets international news through an American lens. It's really sad. Like, for example, me and some other people on Twitter have been trying to at least let people know about what's going on in the Amazon rainforest, because it's been burning down like way more than is good. And obviously forest fires happen, and it's a natural thing, but you don't want it to burn past a critical mass where it can't recover. And there's a danger that the Amazon rainforest could do that. I don't know if it will, but who knows? But I was just tweeting about it, and some people were like, why should I care? Like, I can't fix it. It's not in America. Like, what do you want me to do about it? It's like, you don't have to do anything about it, but maybe you should know that, like, the rainforests are, like, getting just, like, it's one of those things that people don't think that anything that happens in the rest of the world will affect Americans at all. But it does. It does have an impact on us. And if, the lungs of the earth get burned away, that might be a problem.
That's between honest. I think that's why so many people don't understand the whole trade war tariffs. The fact that no, Mexico's not paying for it. No, China's not paying for it. That, like how that stuff actually works. So, I mean, that's part of the missing factors. Like, in their head, they think we're this isolationist country, or in a way we think, America is, self-sufficient and stuff like that. And we want to be more that way, but it's not always going to be in every aspect,
We can't really keep it that way, even if we wanted to.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to do more comments. That's why I passed it.
Oh.
Sorry, I can give it to you.
I need to scroll back up.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, see, I need to catch up. Oh, no, that was it. That was it. The rest of them was just talking amongst themselves.
Are they being polite to each other? I hope they are.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
No, at this point, I think it's kind of rude that they're having conversations. Just kidding.
They're talking about us, but not to us.
This is not a networking platform, okay?
Yeah. But I don't know. I think that you make a good point. Especially, I'm not a globalist, obviously, and I think that we should have a nation, we should have borders and all that stuff. But I think to pretend that, like, we could block ourselves off from the impact of the rest of the world or from what's happening internationally is kind of silly. And, people talk about the migrant crisis or, the border crisis, so to speak. And they're like, all these caravans coming from South America. It's like, what's going on in South America?
Right. Do you know why?
Like, maybe, like, obviously we take actions to protect our borders and things like that. But there's very little discussion of why there might be caravans coming from Guatemala or from all these other places. It's like, maybe there's horrible governments and, corruption or oppression or something happening in these nations that we should make our citizens more aware of, because I do think that international shame actually does have an impact on what countries do. Not as much as it should, but that's the thing. It's like, if people, like the people who responded to me about the rainforest, or people who are like, why should I give a crap about Hong Kong? It's on the other side of the world. It's like, well, what happens in Hong Kong might actually end up coming here. And if you don't pay attention to it, then you'll have problems coming up on your shores and you just won't understand them at all. So,
or just learn from them. Just learn from what's going on.
Learn from their mistakes.
It doesn't have to be something that's even direct. It's just, let's see what's going on there. Be inspired and again, same thing. Like, there's things that we can learn from it. There's things from other countries that they can learn from us. So this is how it goes. But,
but I do think that our audience should certainly take away the value of the Second Amendment in light of those things. I do think Venezuela especially is a very good example of exactly what happens when you give up your Second Amendment in cooperation with socialism. you know? It's like
Yeah.
people get shot in the streets, like people get run over with tanks in the streets, you know, because there's no food, there's no medical supplies, because you destroyed the producers, you seized the means of production, and now no one's producing anything. So
I think it was Nikki Haley. I was at an event with her last week, and she was saying that the average Venezuelan has lost over 20 pounds.
oh yeah, it might be
Like,
more than that.
Yeah, since what's the crisis of what's been happening, like that's just insane. Like,
Isn't that
you know,
scary?
because I mean, I know that people are going to take it to a whole like, oh, I could lose 20 pounds. Okay, yeah, but that's not the way that you want to lose it, dude. Like, that's not the way you want to lose it. So
And
yeah,
I actually, I don't know, we don't have to go too much longer, but I just want to tell this one quick story. So I've been taking teacher training to be a yoga instructor. And there's one girl in my class who, she's an avowed communist, okay? And I do not let communists get away with being vocally communist without me saying something about it. Like, I cannot hold my tongue. But, so, sorry, it's just, I'm laughing even thinking about what she said because it's so crazy. But she said that she tried to go on an anti-capitalist diet, but she couldn't keep it up because all of her food was the product of capitalism. So that's a true story. That's a
No,
true
it's not.
story. And like I was sitting there like, oh my gosh, this chick, like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? And she's like, really, like, we got to seize the means of production, blah blah blah. And some other girl just said, yeah, where would we be without capitalism? And I just said, starving to death. Just straight up was starving to death. And so that girl went quiet, the commie girl went quiet after that, and that freed up everyone else in the class to be like, I'm a capitalist, like, I love capitalism, like, big capitalist over here. But it took me being kind of sassy and like calling this chick out for everyone to feel safe, because the girl who asked where would we be without capitalism later said, I really love capitalism, but she was scared to stand up to a communist. But that's all a long digression. The point of that story is that if you, like, even communists don't understand that the reason why we have so many things and why we have nice things is because of capitalism. And she tried to take away the nice things from herself that capitalism has given her, and she would have starved to death. Even now, if you go on a commie diet, you will starve to death. That is the commie diet. And that's what happened in Venezuela. You know, they're on the socialist diet. They're on the commie diet, because if you don't have producers, you don't have anything to eat. And if you seize the means of production, you don't have any producers. So, anyway.
When they say stuff like that, that's why I feel like they can get away with it, because, well, we're in Denver, Boulder, but it's like they feel that they can just say whatever because no one understands it for the most part. Like, even if they know they're capitalists, like, they just, in this society, in this world, it's just like, you can't, like, for example, Hickenlooper and the Starbucks Schultz and whatever.
Oh, yeah.
You know, him saying that he's a capitalist, or not that he doesn't think
he
socialism
doesn't
is
like hate capitalism.
right,
He
obviously.
got booed.
Is a crazy thing to say. It's something that people like consider you hate speech now. Like, so people are afraid to say anything that is pro-capitalism, pro-oil and gas, pro-anything that
And
it has to do.
But the thing is, the vast majority of Americans are capitalists,
right?
And we love it. And people are just so scared to tell a commie to like shut the hell up. But like, I'm not scared to do that. Communists should be publicly shamed every time they espouse Marxism. It's just as bad as if you were like openly a Nazi, in my opinion, because Mao and Stalin, they killed hundreds of millions
to being
of
a free
people.
thinker? Okay, that's what I'm already hearing people
You
saying.
can't
like,
own property, man.
Or it's like, you just hate poor people, you hate minorities because...
yeah.
Yeah, because communism has like never made poor people or created poverty. Like, ugh, God, it's just so awful. But you're right. I mean, I don't know. Speaking of what you said about like, oh, this is actually great because we could lose some weight. Did you see that horrible article? I think it was, who published that trash? I think it might have been
Slate.
they've published some trash.
Jezebel. Usually
I shouldn't
Yeah.
say which source it was because I can't remember right now. But in effect, they said like poor people around the world are eating more meat, and that's such a bad thing for the environment. Like, I don't know if you saw, but they were straight up saying like poor people are getting more nutrition, but we got to think about the implications of what this could mean. It's like, okay, so the same elitist like jerks who are flying around in private jets and all of that are gonna like get mad at some poor people in like Africa for like eating like eating some beef or some pork or something.
Why would it gotta be Africa? Okay.
Well, they showed clips
like
from Africa.
Oh, of course.
But I like that was a real article. They were really talking about like, you know, the way to save the planet is to not eat meat, and all these poor people are eating meat. Like, what are we gonna do?
Well, I kind of went on a rant on that because actually, I got someone to finally just tell me, which I already knew. Well, because I was talking about David Koch, the Koch brothers.
Oh yeah, one of the Koch brothers died.
Yeah, David Koch died, and it was on Washington Post, of course, and I made a comment because someone was. Oh, I was like, well, basically, you guys should. Like all this hate and vitriol towards them, and like, you know what, they were pioneers in criminal justice reform, and they're the reason why Republicans and libertarians made that a big issue. They put a lot of money into stuff like that, like right on crime wouldn't exist, and right on crime is the reason why we had like the First Step Act and stuff like that. So anyways, so I talk about that, and then this guy, typical, I'm just gonna say, I'm sorry, white dude, right? He needs to make sure that this black conservative doesn't know she doesn't know what she's talking about. Talking about criminal justice reform and it being important and stuff like that. And he goes, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he was basically saying that criminal justice reform wouldn't even be like, it's not that big of an issue because the more important issue is climate change, right?
Oh my god!
And I'm just like, screenshot,
I almost like
put that out there, like this. Like literally the insanity that like black who are in the prisons and criminal justice system right now that you think that climate change is more of a like an existential crisis or a crisis right now than actual criminal justice reform.
Here's my biggest beef with that. Like, even let's say that the climate change thing is just as intense as all of these leftists think, like all of these Gaia worshippers. Let's say that it's just as imminently doomsday-y as they claim. What on earth is the government going to do about it? They can't do anything about it. Like, unless even if America entirely stopped using fossil fuels, like if somehow you could flip a switch, like if the bartender could flip a switch and no one was allowed to use like, you know, fossil fuels anymore, America is not the biggest polluter on earth. Like the rest of the world is polluting, like, you know, China. We're back to China again. But really, I mean, I just think that like even if the hysterics are accurate about climate change, there's nothing that our government can do about it. But what our government can do is stop incarcerating non-violent offenders. That's something that the government actually can stop doing. But it can't stop the weather. It can't stop solar flares. It can't stop an ice age or whatever. Like, we can't... The people... I mean, magicians have been trying to control the weather forever. But, you know, they've never succeeded. So... Nuke that hurricane.
Hillary has something to say.
Don't nuke the hurricanes, guys. It's not nice.
It's not nice. It's on Women's Equality Day. I decided to tweet today about that.
Yeah, all that's going on in the world, the rainforest, Hong Kong, all that. No, I'm going to tweet about nuking hurricanes. That's where Hillary Clinton's mind is at. I hope our audience knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, if
so
not,
we're not just
we'll
all
link
over
it.
the place with that.
So I don't know how long we've been. We've probably been a good amount of time.
Yeah, I think it's probably about that time. Are there any other comments before we close out?
I mean, before we go, sorry.
Why do you think socialism and communism is so appealing to people nowadays?
That's like, I think we should do a whole episode.
Yeah, I actually, my fiance and Zach and I actually were talking about this because I understand why if you don't, like, if you don't think it through, I could understand why it might be appealing. But I actually think that on its face, it's quite, evil. Without a better word. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you want to answer the actual direct question. I have thoughts on that too. But
and I you know what, it's always easy for us to be like, oh, they're dumb, like they like socialism or communism. I think it's part of it. It's the whole that they don't feel like capitalism works for them because, you know, there are people who legitimately are like feeling they're lost. Like, for example, those who went to college and they're not getting the jobs that they thought they were going to get and, you know, life that they're going to have. So they're lost, and they're just thinking like, well, the system which we have right now doesn't work for me. And so what I'm going to go to, oh, here's this other popular thing. Like, it's just what's out there, and they're just searching for something because they don't feel like what's happening right now is working. Right. And I feel like we should, on our side, like, it's always fun to like talk about that stuff, but there are people who are hurting and they're searching for answers. And so I think that is part of it. Is this is people who are hurting and they don't know where to go, and that's just a popular ideology right now.
I also think that the whole like this communist chick in my yoga class, right? I think for her, she views it that she's working for like the working class or something. Like she's like advocating for the little guy against the big evil corporations or something. You know, there's something about like the whole proletariat versus the elite is sort of this idea. It's like, well, all of the people who have been disenfranchised and hurt will finally get a chance under communism or something. But
so meaning she seems that she has more means than that she has an obligation to help.
Or rather that if, I think for in her mind, it's like if the good working class people were the ones controlling all of this, the ones who are in power of industry, that there wouldn't be abuse or like poverty anymore because they would know how to do it right. It's like if the proletariat seizes the means of production, that means that the means of production will be handled in a more compassionate and sharing and like, you know, some of this, it's bullshit that communists say. But part of the reason why I think it's evil on its face and why I don't even think it's a good idea in theory is because of the abolition of property. Like, you have to abolish all private property for communism to exist. Like, that's the first, like, you can't, if you own anything, communism can't work because the state owns everything in the state, nothing outside of the state, you know. I guess that was actually fascism. That was Mussolini who said that. Ugh, crap. But it's the same idea with communism though. Like, and they try to make a distinction between personal property and private property, but if you ever really talk to a communist and have them try to define that in any real way, they can't distinguish the difference. So anyone, in my opinion, that is an avowed communist, they need to, first of all, you have to give up your iPhone. Put it away. You don't own it because in your own ideology, you're not allowed to own anything. And that means also you have to, not only do you need to give all of your property away, but you can't be compensated for it either. Because if you were compensated for it, that would mean that you owned it at some point. So, and ownership of property is not allowed because the community owns it. All your phone, your house, your car, you don't own that. The state owns that. And when I say the state, I mean the proletariat or whoever owns the means of production owns that. So, but it's like you were talking about with America, where we have like property tax and you know, capital gains tax and all of that stuff. It's like if you give up your ownership, like that is your liberty, you know. And the entire premise of communism is that the individual has to be subjected to the will of the collective. So you have no property, and without property you have no liberty, because you can't be an individual unless you own your body and unless you can own the fruits of your labor.
And I think a lot of people don't want the like responsibility of liberty, because I think like my generation and like a lot of millennials, they've lost the like self-identity and being able to take personal responsibility. So by supporting communism or socialism, it shifts that like burden of responsibility onto the collective whole. So then if something like, say, when you're hundreds of $1,000s in debt, you can say, this isn't my fault, this is their fault, and then like you don't have to take that like blame and like own up to that responsibility and own up to the actions you took. And I think a lot like the society has kind of lost that.
Right.
I feel like a lot of it is like, this is how I kind of like to picture it. Like, I love How I Built This, NPR's How I Built This, the podcast. And for me, my mentality is like, man, listening to their stories, like hearing all the stuff that they did, it's always like, man, I want that to be me one day. Like, I have the opportunity for that to be me, right? Like, but then I think some people get into the mindset of, oh man, I'm never gonna be that, so I'm just gonna settle for, you know, mediocrity. you know?
Yeah.
Like, and
A lot of
I feel like
people do
that's
settle
the
for that.
difference. Like, why people are why that's popular is like, unfortunately, we have less people hearing people's stories like that, like the founders, the people who are becoming, who are CEOs of these great, organizations and these things that they've built, right? How I built this, right?
You didn't
And
build that.
They don't
Sorry.
build it, right? I know, that whole thing. And so they're just like, you know what? I'm never going to be that person. Like, they just think more of the defeatist attitude, the victim attitude, right? That I think that's a lot of it, the psychology of a lot of these people having stuck in, I'm never going to be that person. I can't be that person. And the less people, and like America's founded on those people who believe the opposite. Like, I could be that person.
Right, and who, you know, had rugged individualism.
That's the American dream. Literally, the American dream is that mentality. So
It's
that's
true.
part of that.
And that's why I really like Jordan Peterson's advice, and partially why I think he resonates with so many people. He talks about, find the heaviest load you can carry and carry it, and that's where you'll find your meaning. And I do think that it's true. Obviously picking up a heavy load doesn't sound that appealing, but I do think that even with me, with work and stuff, when I feel like I've done something that contributed to society or contributed to the world in some way, it does give me a sense of meaning. And usually that's the result of me having to do some work in some fashion or take responsibility for something. And it's true. People, and Jordan Peterson talks about this as well, how our generations have been taught so much about our rights, what we're entitled to, what we have a right to, but what we actually need to work for is not spoken about. Like, what the responsibilities you need to take are not spoken about. It's like, you don't have to be responsible for anything. You're entitled to everything. And that's why people like Bernie Sanders are so appealing. It's like, you're entitled to healthcare. You're entitled to education. You're entitled to have a good life just by existing. But that's really, you have to work to have some of that stuff.
And it's not even just that you have to work. I mean, even going biblically, God has created us to work.
Or we should do something.
And Adam, even like Adam, he specifically told Adam that he needed to name, the birds and animals. Like, he knew he created us, right? And so, and even I'm like, for me, like right now I'm like kind of like a stay-at-home wife a little bit. Like, that's never been my dream, but kind of
cool,
been my dream at the same time. But like, the reality of that is the fact that like I am made to work. And human beings are made to work, and you're supposed to produce and to contribute to society.
So we're gonna have your husband on our podcast, but
yes,
since the fucking subject has been, I forget I'm not on my podcast. Okay,
yeah, my husband knows you cursed.
okay. What about the parable of the farmer?
Which one? The talent?
Which farmer, Edgar?
Yeah, no matter what time they show up, you pay them the same amount.
Oh, the product. No, that's not the prodigal son. But I know which one you're talking about. It's like the workers who showed up in the afternoon still get the same pay as the workers who were there the whole day. Yeah.
That's from Jeebus.
That's what they use.
Straight from Jeebus.
That's straight
The
from
parable.
Jeebus.
Yes.
Terrible.
Matthew 13.
Well, I actually have always liked that parable to the extent that it's like, it's never too late to become a good person or to realize your potential. And you'll still reap the same rewards even if you do it late. Anyway, that's
that's why we need my husband on here. But because I'm not going to go into that parable because I don't know the actual meaning. I could say all this other stuff of saying, oh, well, he really means that. Because a lot of the times, because Jesus used a lot of parables, and particularly like with sowing and reaping and stuff to show like, sowing, like, sowing the work that you do to, spread the gospel and to, reap. Like, that's, he's using those type of analogies to essentially connect and be connect to those who he was around, which were those people who were farmers and who were in agriculture. So that was something that they could understand and grasp. So that's why a lot of those, like the talents and stuff like that, a lot of that have to do with that. But anyways, I know you're talking about, and that, to be honest, we just should just do a whole social, like the movement of socialism and socialists using Jesus as
I forgot about that.
Jesus is a socialist type of.
I think the biggest argument you can say is in the Bible it doesn't say Jesus told the government to come in and decide it. I think Jesus was a volunteerist, which I think it is important to share your wealth to those who are less fortunate, but I don't think it should be driven by the government forcing you at gunpoint to do it.
Right. Plus, what is the test of our lives if we're forced to obey all of the commandments? Like, what have you shown as a human if the only reason you give is because you do it at gunpoint, or the only reason why you help the sick or visit the prisoners or whatever is because, like beatitude / works of mercy stuff. Like, what if the only reason why you did that is because you had a gun to your head? It's not actually, you're not actually filling your soul with anything beneficial with that, and I don't think that you're saving yourself if the government is doing all that for you. And that's why the whole argument, it's like, well, taxation is just a method of helping poor people. It's like, well, the charities and churches really do that very well too, and we don't have to have a gun in the room to facilitate it. Way better. I know. Like, most of the government has a whole bureaucracy that's taken a slice of all of that. It's like they rob you and then they take a slice of it, and then maybe some people get some food stamps or something. But that's also building their dependency on the government and not helping them, become their own autonomous people. So it's really, Jesus is not a socialist. It pisses me off so much when people say that. It's like so not true. Anyone who says that Jesus is a socialist has not read the Gospels. That's what I think.
Yeah, he's a volunteerist.
100%.
Because he goes and he condemns the tax collectors.
Yeah, the only time Jesus gets ticked off is when he's in the temple and he flips the tables of the money changers. Man, he kicks them out. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. I've read the Gospels all the way through recently, and
I'm gonna get people like Antonia. I'm very and at my church, you're gonna get the people listening.
Oh Lord, well, I'm a Catholic. Everyone knows I'm a sinner. Or we just assume that we're sinners and wrong.
This is why male voice is not appreciated. He's the one who brought all of this.
Women's Equality Day. But it's probably about that time, unless anyone else has pressing questions in the chat.
Yeah, and if you do, we're here. triggerwarning2a@gmail.com. Guys, we love hearing from you guys. Continue to chat away. I'm sure you guys can go in the actual, not just the live chat, but the actual comments, because it's funny. I look at the comments now and it's like 1 or 2, because everyone's in the live chat now. So it's like, oh, come on, not even like someone saying something mean.
No one's even insulting me in the comments.
Come on. Yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining us tonight, and thank you so much, Emily, Patriot Panda.
Thanks for having me.
How can, if people want to follow you, or how can they do that?
I'm just on Instagram.
Just on Instagram. Okay, just only Instagram. So Patriot Panda.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
And if you guys liked this podcast or this video, if you're watching on YouTube, please share it, and like it, because YouTube is throttling us with the kind of subject matter we talk about. So, and obviously, if you want to be a patron and support us that way, that's great. But more than anything, just share this if you like our content. So.
Yeah. Alrighty. And we'll have the Patreon account link in the description. We'll put that there for you guys to help support us, because I think I told you guys last week, it is official. They flag my name, so probably flagging this whole podcast. They demonetize it every chance they get. So it is up to you guys and your support. Also, want to thank Guns for Everyone and their sponsorship of our podcast. And we wouldn't be literally wouldn't be here
in this space
without Guns for Everyone. So you should check them out in Wheat Ridge and Thornton.
Yeah, and if you're in Colorado and want to take a free concealed carry class, be sure to look up Guns for Everyone, because they do concealed carry classes all the time, and that's how I got my concealed carry.
That's how I got mine too.
Yeah, and I teach the ladies only class on Wednesday nights. Not this Wednesday, but usually. So you guys should look into that. But again, thank you guys, ladies and gents, for going to Trigger Warning 2A.
For listening and watching and commenting.
I'm tired.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.